today. We have this day once a year, and to come up with something new to say, but there's nothing new under the sun, Solomon said. And whenever you think about the resurrection, it is the same thing that's happened year after year after year. We commemorate. We say the same thing every time we take the Lord's Supper. We think about it. But I got to thinking about that and meditating on what we were going to talk about today. And I was trying to think the ministry of Jesus. He was around 33 years old when he was crucified. He really didn't have much of a ministry up till about 30 years old. At 30 years old, he really became his ministry, got baptized by John the Baptist, and chose his disciples and started on his way of preaching the gospel for that 3.5 years. Then you read the Gospels. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you read those and you think, my gracious, how did he pack all that stuff into 3.5 years? It was just amazing. Well, can you imagine what the disciples saw? They saw Jesus raise somebody from the dead. It'd be kind of like going to a funeral home for a funeral, and somebody going into the viewing area and reaching across the edge of the casket and take somebody by the hand and said, "You want to stand up?" And everybody would go. Be blown away by that, wouldn't we? But the disciples saw that 2 or 3 times. He said, a little boy raised from the dead, saw Jairus' daughter raised from the dead. He himself raised Lazarus from the dead. The healings. When you read the Gospels, you are just tore up by the amount of healings that he did, because we would read a story about him healing somebody, and in the last 2 or 3 verses before it went on to another story, it would say, and many more, or a crowd came. And there would be statements there like, and he healed them all. And I just think about those disciples just standing there looking at him and saying, my gracious, wow, how does he do this? How is it? They saw him take a little boy's lunch. They brought it to him. Some small fish and a couple of biscuits. And he said, now we're going to start breaking this apart. And you pass it out. Can you imagine what your idea would be if I was to tell you that we're going to feed all of the surrounding areas around the lake here. And we're going to start off with these 2 fish and a couple of biscuits. Somebody's going to go hungry. But that 5,000 people not only did not go hungry, but they had 12 baskets of food left over after it was done. That's like when we go down to a dinner, they was, well, I hope we have enough food. Well, I never remembered us not having enough food here at the Gap. We always had enough food. Are we going to have enough food? Well, everybody usually winds up taking something home with them. Well, that's the way they did whenever that little boy's lunch was spread apart, was that. They had Philip's mother-in-law. She got healed. God just did so many things. I'm trying to get to the resurrection. And I'm trying to bring you through a story of watching the disciples as they try to learn who Jesus is. You say, why was it so hard for them to believe? Well, if you would be honest and you would put yourself back to where they were, you'd be mesmerized by watching him do what he does. And you'd think, is he a magician? Is he a magic worker? What? how's he doing this? Because I knew that guy. For 38 years, he's been it must not be the same guy. He must have had a twin. I didn't know about it. Because that ain't him. Turn that water into wine. Just on, and those disciples that he saw and had called into the ministry, they saw him transfigured up on the mountain. They saw Moses and Elijah come down. They saw the glow of that transfiguration. He was changed. They heard God's voice out of heaven saying, "This is my son." You hear him. Listen to what he's got to say. They saw him take a net at their hands and catch so many fish they couldn't bring it into the ship. They had to drag the net up to the shore to even get it out. And then on that day when he did the Lord's Supper, they saw this man that they know to be something more than they've ever seen. They saw him get up and go take a towel and wrap it around himself and kneel down in front of them and start washing their feet. Which it should have been any one of them that should have done that before they first come in. The disciples struggled with a faith to believe, didn't they? Of course, it's a good thing we don't ever struggle with that, because we always have complete faith, don't we? We're always sure that we know what's going on and how's it going and how we're going to get there. I had my eyes. See, I'm not wearing glasses. I had my cataracts taken off my eyes. Boy, I can see real good for a long distance. Now I can't see reading. Whenever the women come back from the tomb, the disciples found it almost impossible to believe that what they said they saw, did they really see? They talk about the tomb going up to it, and they're thinking, well, how are we going to get the stone rolled away? How much of their story is just like us? They believe, but then they doubt. If we don't get that stone rolled back, we can't go in there and do anything. Belief was a problem. There were 3 specific times that Jesus, without doubt, told the disciples that he was going to be killed, buried, and raised again. All 3 of these times were major events. Not something that you would lightly forget. I mean, they were major events. At Peter's confession, when Jesus was saying to him, well, who do people say that I am? And they would say, well, some people say you're Elijah. And some people say you're somebody else. He said, well, who do you think I am? They said, well, you're the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus looked at Peter when he said that and said, flesh and blood has not revealed that to you, Peter, but my Father which is in heaven. And then he said in the Luke 9:22, when he had finished telling them who he was, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be slain and be raised the 3rd day. That was the first time we're going to see. The second time was at the Transfiguration, where we just talked about. They sat there and they listen to the birds singing. I imagine that's what it sounded out on the outside of the tomb when Jesus was laying there. Those birds were singing because they had more sense than the people did that was watching it. They was happy Jesus was going to get up in a little bit. So that transfiguration happened, and they saw him. And then when the transfiguration was gone, they said, "Well, let's make some altars, and let's." And God said, "You boys just need to calm down a little bit. This ain't about making altars for all of them. This is about exalting my Son so that he can bring me honor and glory." And then it said, "And while they abode in Galilee, Jesus said unto them, The Son of Man shall be betrayed into the hands of men. They shall kill him, and the third day he shall be raised again." And they were exceedingly sorry. Now, if they were exceedingly sorry, would I be safe to say that they understood what he said? That they understood that he's going to get killed? That they understood he's going to be buried? And that they understood that he's going to be raised again? That was the second time. Then when he was going to Jerusalem to die itself, they were walking along. He said, "Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and they shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock, to scourge, to crucify him, and on the third day he shall rise again." 3 times. It wasn't just a casual conversation. It wasn't just something that they told that they would easily forget. 3 times they've been told black and white, I'm going to die. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to be raised again on the third day. Now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came to the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. They found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. They entered in, and they found not the body of the Lord Jesus. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed about that, behold, 2 men stood by them in shining garments. And as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? What does that mean? That means I told you, boys, that I'm not going to stay dead. They were afraid. They bowed down their faces to the earth, and they said unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen. Remember how he spake unto you while he was yet with you in Galilee? Remember what? Remember the transfiguration. Remember when Peter was talking about it. Remember those times that Jesus said himself that he was going to die and be raised again. Verse 8 of that chapter 24 in Luke says, And they remembered his words. But on that resurrection morning, not one disciple believed enough to be sitting outside the tomb when Jesus came forth. Not one disciple believed him enough to set their alarm clock and get up early. In fact, somebody had to come back and almost drag them out there to see what was going on. And on this resurrection morning that we're here, and like many days that we've been here before and been sitting outside and start to watch over Walter and Judy's house, the red glow of a rising sun. And we began to instantly replay those stories we read in the Bible about the angel coming and rolling that stone away. I can't imagine what it would be like to wake up in a tomb like Jesus did. For 3 days and 3 nights, his body has laid on a cold stone slab. And all of a sudden, on this Easter morning, his heart starts beating. Blood starts circulating. He has this glorified body now. He takes this cloth that they had covered his face with and folds it up and lays it on top of where he was laid. His grave clothes he took off, threw them down there, and was ready to ascend into heaven. Then we hear our little song that we sing, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Well, were you there when they raised him from the grave? And that's where we are today. We've come to commemorate. We come to joyfully look into a rock hole that has nothing in it. Dusty now. But Jesus was raised from the dead. The world disregards it, says it's impossible, but they don't know the God that we know. And with great joy, I come here this morning to commemorate his resurrection. I wonder where I would have been on the first Easter morning. Would I have chosen to stay? Maybe I would have asked my wife or my kids or somebody, what time did he say he's going to be resurrected? Well, I ain't going nowhere that early. But nobody showed up. We are in a generation now where you and I need to show up. I've got a great sermon for you at 10 o'clock. I cannot hardly contain myself to start it right now. But I'm looking forward to come back and sharing it with you.